let's get to an archaeologically related news story before we get into some of the questions for this week, because this is a news story that has also fostered some questions. This is something that was sent in to me by Tom this week with some questions about what are exactly do we need to do with this? And you may have seen this news story regarding a codex that's going up for auction at Christie's. And this is the Crosby-Schoyan Codex. And we want to talk about some of the background of this and then some of the maybe implications or questions that we should have. This codex was written in Coptic on papyrus and is dated to around 250 to 350 CE. It was produced in one of the first Christian monasteries in Egypt. It was found not too far away from the Nag Hammadi libraries, and it was discovered in the 1950s. The dating of this codex places it right at that transition period from papyrus scrolls to codex format, so it's interesting in this time period, but also because of its location. It was originally found, as I said, in the 1950s, and consists of 104 pages that they believe was written by one hand based on the type of writing over a period of years. And interestingly, among its context, it contains what they're saying is the first complete text of 1 Peter, as well as the book of Jonah. It also contains some other materials like pieces from 2 Maccabees and some homilies and other aspects of it. It went from, when it was discovered, it had been with the University of Mississippi for a period of time. In the 80s, it was sold. It's been in private collections since then, and it's now going up to auction from this private collection. So, Bob, a question that I want to have based off of some of this is from Christie's descriptions of things. Some of this is from the private collections description of things. A main point of emphasis in all of the news stories talking about this is emphasizing this oldest complete version of 1 Peter and of Jonah.
Yeah.
And this is similar to conversations we've had in the past, but here I want to focus in on manuscripts. When we're using the descriptor oldest, or when these stories are using the descriptor oldest for manuscripts, does that equate to best? And should we think this is the oldest version of 1 Peter? Therefore, this is the best, the purest version of 1 Peter.
Right.
Or is that an oversimplistic thing that the audience needs to go, I have some questions?
The reason that we get this claim oldest copy, the reason they want to make that is in text criticism, you have this standard that basically says the older a manuscript is, the older a document is, the more, let's say, the more original it is. That is, if you have something written in 80 or 90 CE, that's going to be better than a document or more original, less edited, less redacted than something that's written in 190. So because, and Bart Ehrman likes to use this, you've got copies of copies of copies of copies of copies. So the earlier a manuscript, the older a manuscript is, the more original it's going to be. The problem is when you're dealing with things that are written, that we would assume that these are all written in Greek, right? These early letters. If you're dealing with a Coptic manuscript, now you're dealing with a translation, and you're a couple centuries out. So if this is the oldest version of this, okay, but you're still dealing with what, 3rd century, 4th century?
Yeah. Yeah, they're saying 250 to 350 CE. Yeah. I don't remember if I said BCE or CE, but it is CE. So we're moving into the future here.
So then you get to have the conversation of, when Christie's puts this up for auction, is the buyer going to be, and everybody pretty much knows how I feel about auctioning off and acquiring ancient manuscripts. I'm not a fan, in case you're wondering, but this is a legal thing. It's in a private. It was taken out of Egypt prior to 1970. At least that's the story that we know. So it's not subject to the UNESCO laws and these cultural heritage laws. So this is a legal transaction, as far as we know. But the question is the person who's going to buy this doing it for the academic study of this, which we assume has largely been done if they know all these facts about it, or are they treating it like a relic? And like the bones of Peter? Are you doing it because it's the earliest manuscript, so supposedly earliest manuscript of First Peter, or is it like the bones of Peter, and you just want to have something associated? Supposedly, scholars largely think this is pseudepigraphical, right? That that Peter really didn't write First Peter,
right?
But it's affiliated with him. So do you just want to own something affiliated with First Peter so that you can say that you have this, so that you can sell tickets and bring people into your museum, so that you can have the opportunity to proselytize these individuals or to reaffirm their faith? Or are you treating it like a relic, or are you doing it because you want to get it off the black market and you want to do academic study of this document?
Mm-hmm.
The motivation for acquiring this, one of the other motivations that I've heard in the past is you just want to get it off the market so it doesn't go to someone like that.
Right.
And that usually drives up the price.
It drives up the price. And yes, there are instances where individuals buy things and then turn around and donate it to a museum, donate it to a university to say, like, we understand you don't have the funds to buy this. I'm going to do that. But it inflates that price up. Another risk is that this gets purchased by an individual that just wants to have it at home and it disappears. It had been at the University of Mississippi for around 30 years. I know it's got some connections with Duke as well for study. So there has been an academic study of this in the past. But as we see all the time with the Vesuvius Project or with the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's new technologies that can help us learn more about these texts. And so while this has been studied in the past, it could be interesting to see these pages re-examined with new technologies and new techniques of, is there more here? So if it goes into another private collection, we don't know what we don't know. We think we know things. It could disappear. Or I think a real risk is it gets bought by somebody that wants to maximize a specific aspect of this, not the whole thing, but a page or a couple pages to sell tickets or to bring people in that can misrepresent. Maybe not completely untruthfully of this is claimed to be or currently held as the oldest version of this, but in Coptic, coming from a time later. And I think another point too of the oldest and best not lining up here is oldest can be the oldest of one version of this tradition as well. And so when you're seeing these things of, like, we know from divergences between the Septuagint and the Masoretic text, there can be different traditions that exist alongside each other. So this could be the oldest of one individual version of this. Right. So as you see these news stories, and the price will, I'm sure, continue to go up in the headlines. It's going to be on display for a little, as usual. It'll go on display in a museum for a while before the sale. We don't normally spend a lot of time dealing with this kind of resale of things, but it's a story that I got brought in as a question that I thought is worth mentioning, of some of the questions that as you see these stories, you should be aware of. How are they presenting things? Where is this coming from? What are some of the risks associated? Who stands to gain and how?
And keep in mind, a lot of these claims that we hear about this manuscript are marketing claims. They're getting ready to auction this. A private collector acquired this, and now he's selling it, essentially, and he's going to want to maximize his revenue. And so he's going to make claims like it's 52 leaves or 104 pages, right? A single scribe is said to have written right? So it's one hand. That's the claim, at least.
That's the claim.
Over a period of 40 years. There's some claims made about, but the purpose of some of these claims, at least, is to increase the amount of money he can bring in on the thing. So again, I'm not a fan of these auctions. I'm not a fan of it's a legal thing. Mm-hmm. It would be much nicer if these private collections were just handed to museums as donations, but that's oftentimes not what these collectors are doing. They're doing it for money. And so it's an issue that's going to continue to be an issue until we get all of these manuscripts out of private collections, and that's going to take a bit.